The talk you are about to hear is by Sensei Richard von Sturmer. The Teisho this evening, Tuesday the 9th of July, we're going to look at a Theravada text, the questions of King Milinda. It's translated by Rhys Davies. It's an old translation, but it's still in use. I think it's from 1894. So sort of translation's a little bit old-fashioned, but T.W. Rhys Davies was an early scholar of Buddhism in the West. And it's a celebrated discussion between King Milinda and Nāgasena about 500 years after the death of the Buddha. It's a Pali text, and it's best preserved in its Sri Lankan version. A few days after our 20th celebrations, we had a visit from a Dharma friend, the Venerable Panasari, who is a Sri Lankan monk. He lived in Auckland for quite a while, and we got to know him. He relocated to Australia, but he was visiting Auckland again, so he popped in to see us. And we were talking about a number of different things, and I mentioned I would be giving a Teisho on the questions of King Milinda, and his eyes lit up because he knew this very well from his studies. And he also mentioned something I didn't really realize, but he said that in Sri Lanka, which is not the case in Thailand or Myanmar, Sri Lankan monks, from the Theravada, of course, they also study Mahayana texts. And they know Mahayana, they know the Mahayana teachings quite well and appreciate them. This is a really good thing that's happened in modern Buddhism. It's just people from different traditions sharing the teachings and learning from those different traditions. And so in the spirit of that, we'll have a look at this text. Milinda, the king, his Greek name is Menandro, and he was one of the Greek kings who ruled in northwestern India, which at that time was under Greek dominion. And it was the dominion founded by Alexander the Great. And in fact, he's the only Greek king remembered in India. And of course, his background was the Greek gods and the Greek religion. When Roshi and I were in training in Rochester, sort of came up on one or two occasions, what's the face of a Western Buddha? Buddhism is well known to adapt itself to the culture it takes root in. And Cambodian Buddha figures are very distinctive. You just know it's a Cambodian Buddha. And Thai Buddha figures are very distinctive, as are Chinese and Japanese Buddhas. So the question was, what will a Western Buddha look like when it's carved or depicted? Well, you just need to go back to this time in India, northwestern India, and the rise of the Gandharan kingdom, which is now northwestern India and parts of Pakistan and Afghanistan, which came under Greek rule. And some of the earliest Buddha figures, Buddha statues, were dressed in Greek robes and had Western features. And in Gandhara art, the Buddha was often depicted as an Indian version of the Greek god Apollo. And when I was looking at, they're quite wonderful figures. I came across a photo of the Buddha, and beside him was a protective deity who was clearly Hercules. He had his club and his lion skin, was wearing his lion skin. So it's a fascinating period, this 100 AD, with this merging of East and West, such an early time. And also, to make it more fascinating, it was the beginning of Mahayana Buddhism as well, and bodhisattva figures around that time were also given Western features and wore Western-type robes. So Nāgasena was a Buddhist who lived in the 1st century AD. He came from a Brahmin family and entered the Buddhist Sangha at the age of 15. And he is said to have attained the stage of an arhat, an enlightened follower of the Buddha. And King Milinda, the Greek king, he liked nothing better than to go out with his huge retinue and visit towns and villages in his kingdom and engage holy men and sages in debate. He was skilled in rhetoric. He knew all about Hinduism and Buddhism. And so he debated these different spiritual leaders, if you like. However, after each visit, he came away disappointed. He'd sort of beaten them in debate, but he really hadn't learnt much. And his wisdom hadn't increased. And many of his spiritual questions were left unanswered until he met up with Nāgasena. So the text begins, the Buddhist elders went to the city of Sagala, where King Milinda had his palace, and it said that they were lighting it up with their yellow robes like lamps and bringing down upon it the breeze from the heights where the sages dwell. And Nāgasena appeared in their company like a lion of the hills. So King Milinda and his retinue came out by chariot to meet Nāgasena. And this is the first of his questions, the first dialogue they had. So the king, how is your reverence known? And what, sir, is your name? I am known as Nāgasena, O king, and it is by that name that my brethren in the faith address me. But Nāgasena is only a generally understood term, a designation in common use, for there is no permanent individuality involved in the matter. So, right there is Nāgasena's teaching, no self. This recalls the famous interview in China between Emperor Wu and Bodhidharma, where the emperor asked Bodhidharma, "Who are you?" And Bodhidharma replied, "I don't know." Nāgasena's response was, "No permanent self." So the king went on, "Is it all the skandhas combined that are Nāgasena?" "No, great king. But is there anything outside the 5 skandhas that is Nāgasena?" "No, great king." "Who then is the Nāgasena that we see before us?" So that was the king's question. Who are you then? The good thing to take up texts like this, it's in our Dharma studies, is you get to learn about basic Buddhist teaching from the Theravadan tradition. And one of the basic teachings are the 5 skandhas that make up an individual. And the 5 skandhas briefly are form, our physical body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. Those are the 5 skandhas. The 4th skandha, mental formations, is very complex. We haven't got time to go into the 4th skandha, but it includes our impulses, our conditioning, our karmic traits, what drives us psychologically. That's all contained in the 4th skandha, mental formations. And it's the constant interplay and interconnection among the skandhas that has the effect of giving a false sense of personal identity and continuity. Whereas, in truth, there is no definite I existing by itself, independent of the ever-shifting relationship among psychic and physical forces. Can't help thinking, if we just take the first skandha, the rupa skandha, which is form, can't help thinking about the preoccupation these days of taking selfies all the time. Especially among influencers on social media, the preoccupation of depicting oneself as beautiful or handsome, day after day, photo after photo, can be seen as an addiction to the first skandha, to our physical appearance. But this is not who we truly are. It's just superficial on so many levels. Or you could say it's superfiction. Superficial and superfiction, creating this outward image of ourselves. Now, in answer to the king's question about identity, Nāgasena uses a simile of the chariot. And this is, in fact, the most famous section in the questions of King Milinda. So he says, who's this Nāgasena that we see before us? Nāgasena says to the king, did you come on foot or in chariot? I came in a chariot. Then if you came, sire, in a carriage, explain to me what that is. Is it the pole that is the chariot? I did not say that. Is it the axle that is the chariot? Certainly not. Is it the wheels, or the framework, or the ropes, or the yoke, or the spokes, or the wheel that are the chariot? And to all these the king answered no. Then is it all these parts that are the chariot? No, sir. But is there anything outside them that is the chariot? And still the king answered no. Then I can discover no chariot. Chariot is merely an empty sound. What then is the chariot you say you came in? It is a falsehood that your majesty has spoken, an untruth. There is no such thing as a chariot. You are king over all India, a mighty monarch. Why do you speak an untruth? And Milinda, the king, replied to Nāgasena and said, I have spoken no truth, Reverend Sir. It is on account of its having all these things, the pole and the axle, the wheels and the framework, the rope and the yoke and the spokes, that it comes under the generally understood term, the designation in common use of chariot. Very good. Your Majesty has rightly grasped the meaning of chariot. And so it is, on account of all those things you questioned me about, the physical makeup of the human body and the other skandhas, that I come under the generally understood term, the designation in common use of Nāgasena. This famous dialogue has a parallel case in the Mumonkan, where Zen master Getan said to a monk, Si Chang, the first wheelmaker in China, made a cart whose wheels had 100 spokes. If you took off the wheels and removed the axle, what would it be? So if you have this giant wheel of 100 spokes, if you took off the wheel and removed the axle, the spokes, what would it be? That's what you work on with this koan. What would it be? What is this true self that is no self? Who am I when all my attributes, my physical form, and my mental components are removed? In the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, the Buddha compares himself to a cart, and he says, I have reached the term of my life, which is 80, just as an old cart is made to go by, being held up together with straps, so the Tathagata's body is kept going by being strapped up. In the end, we all fall apart. And this leads to the king's next question. The king said, Nāgasena, is there anyone who after death is not reborn? Some are and some not. Who are they? An ignorant being is reborn. One who has gained true insight into existence is not. Will you then be reborn? If when I die with craving for existence in my heart, yes. But if not, no. And the king said, very good, Nāgasena. In Theravada Buddhism, the highest achievement is to become an arhat, an enlightened follower of the Buddha, who has freed himself from all the bonds of suffering and on death will enter nirvana, nibbana in Pali. Nirvana is the absence of birth and death, the end of suffering, the extinguishing of all craving, the release from the wheel of birth and death. In Mahayana Buddhism, not much attention is given to nirvana, certainly not in Zen. In Mahayana Buddhism, the emphasis is on becoming a bodhisattva, an enlightened being who postpones his or her own entry into nirvana so that they can help sentient beings reach the other shore. The emphasis is on altruism, selfless concern for others, and not on self-liberation. And likewise, rebirth is not really emphasized at all in Zen Buddhism especially. But the king presses the point. He really wants to know about rebirth. And the king said, who is born Nāgasena? Does he remain the same or become another after he's died? Nāgasena replies, neither the same nor another. Suppose, O king, suppose a man, O king, were to light a lamp. Would it burn the night through? Yes, it might do so. Now, is it the same flame that burns in the first watch of the night, sir, and in the second watch? No. Or the same that burns in the second watch and in the third? No. Then is there one lamp in the first watch and another in the second and another in the third? No. The light comes from the same lamp all the night through. Just so, O king, is the continuity of a person or thing maintained. One comes into being, another passes away, and the rebirth is, as it were, simultaneous. Thus, neither as the same nor as another does a man go on to the last phase of his self-consciousness. This last part, I'm not sure if it's the translation. It's a bit difficult. The question here is, what is reborn? If there's no permanent self, no self, what is reborn? Nāgasena appears to be saying that there is a continuity between one life and the next, as well as that we're dying and being reborn at each instant. And this is very much the Zen view. Zen stresses the present moment, just this moment. The person I was when I was sitting half an hour ago is not exactly the same person who came up and offered incense before our chanting service, and it's not the same person exactly as the person who is sitting here now giving this Teisho. So we're all undergoing continual micro-change. The Buddha said that the question of rebirth is profound and difficult. We can say that a karmic energy, a habit energy, is transmitted from one life to the next. We are born because there was unfinished business, if you like, from a previous life. Yasutani Roshi is helpful in this. Philip Kaplow's main teacher. Yasutani writes, the 5th century Indian ancestor Vasubandhu taught that our life is like a wave. A wave arises when the energy of the wind passes through the water. The same energy that created a particular human being will produce a new life in the same way that the energy of a wave produces the next. This energy force does not disappear, but goes on to create a succession of lives. And that's karma. Nāgasena uses the analogy of a lamp. I find it helpful to use the analogy of a candle. If you have a lit candle and you transfer the flame from your candle to another candle, then is the original flame the same as the flame now burning in the second candle? Is it the same or different? It's not exactly the same, and it's not exactly different. We can clearly see that light, the flame, has been passed on from one candle to another. So again, in Buddhist thinking, we are here because of our unresolved karma from a previous life. We don't need to believe in rebirth to practice Zen. Definitely not. However, if you really believe that this life is all you have, and then nothing exists of yourself after you die, then, as a Zen student, you should redouble your efforts so that you can see into the great matter of birth and death within this one lifetime. You should, just redouble your effort and commitment to practice. Right effort is one of the aspects of the Noble Eightfold Path. And the king next said, "You told me, Nāgasena, that your renunciation was in order that suffering might perish away and no further suffering might spring up. Yes, that is so. But is that renunciation brought about by previous effort or to be striven after now in this present time. Effort is now concerned with what still remains to be done. Former effort has accomplished what it had to do. That was Nāgasena's response. Effort is now concerned with what still remains to be done. Former effort has accomplished what it has to do, what it had to do. So our commitment, our effort and our zazen over the years has led us to this point in time. And our practice depends on our future effort, our commitment to our Zen practice. It's ongoing effort. And this is not a sort of a huffing and puffing type of effort, but just an ongoing commitment to the practice. And that's how we mature in our practice. In the Pali Suttas, there's a set phrase for when a disciple becomes an arhat and is liberated from the rounds of birth and death. Destroyed is birth, the holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more for this state of being. Another translation, there is no more for this state of becoming. The Buddha had some encouraging words about effort. Those who follow the way might well follow the example of an ox that marches through mud carrying a heavy load. He is tired, but his steady gait, looking forward, will never relax until he comes out of the mire, and it is only then that he rests. O monks, remember that passion and delusive behaviour are more than the mire, and that you can escape only by earnestly and steadfastly practicing the way. On another occasion, the Buddha called his followers Pati Sotagama, from Pati Sota, to go against the stream, to awaken. And Zen practice is really going against the stream. In Zen, working on the breath, with the breath, working on the koan, we're going against the stream of our habitual patterns, our ways of thinking, our conditioning. And we're also going against societal forces as well, of consumerism, of appearances, of endless diversions and gratifications. This turning the mind inward is a way of going against the stream. And there we have the image in China and Japan of the carp that forges against the stream, and in doing so, it gains strength by this going against the flow. So the king said, going back to nirvana, is cessation nirvana? Yes, Your Majesty. How is that, Nāgasena? All foolish individuals take pleasure in the senses and in the objects of the senses, find delight in them, continue to cling to them. Hence are they carried away by the flood of human passions. They are not set free from birth, old age, and death, from grief, lamentation, pain, sorrow, and despair. They are not set free from suffering. But the wise, O King, neither take pleasure in those things, nor find delight in them, nor continue clinging to them. Inasmuch as he does not, in him craving ceases, And by the cessation of craving, grasping ceases. And by the cessation of grasping, becoming ceases. And when becoming has ceased, birth ceases. And with its cessation, birth, old age, and death, grief, lamentation, pain, sorrow, and despair cease to exist. Thus is the cessation brought about. Thus is the cessation brought about, the end of all that accumulation of pain. Thus this is that cessation is nirvana. Very basic Theravadan teaching. And Nāgasena is referring here to a very important teaching of dependent origination. The Buddha refused to answer the question about the rebirth of a specific individual. He said it's the wrong question to ask if a person's going to be reborn again. The right question, he told his disciples, was the question of becoming. What causes the cycle of suffering from one life to the next? The emphasis lay on, and does lie on, process, not on the illusion of a permanent self, but the process he articulated as the 12 links in the chain of dependent origination that keep us on the wheel of birth and death. Again, this is a big subject that we can only touch upon. It's helpful when you study a Tibetan mandala, like one that we have in the other room. Around the edge of the mandala are the 12 links in the chain of dependent origination, and they're illustrated by very, very lively illustrations for each link. And the links are ignorance, karmic formations, consciousness, name and form, the 6 senses, contact, feeling, craving, clinging, becoming, and the 12th, birth, and the 12th one is old age and death. Those are the 12. Just going back to Nāgasena. The wise one, O king, neither takes pleasure in those things, that's feelings of desire and aversion, which is the 7th link, nor finds delight in them, this is the 8th, this is craving, nor continues clinging to them, that's the 9th link. Inasmuch as he does not, in him craving ceases, and by the cessation of craving, grasping, clinging ceases, and by the cessation of grasping, becoming ceases, and when becoming has ceased, birth ceases, and with its cessation, birth, old age, and death. So that's going up, proceeding to the end, to the 12th. A modern commentator, Bhikkhu Bodhi, says this, which is helpful. The chain of dependent origination is broken in the link between feeling, the 7th link, and craving, the 8th. Feeling arises necessarily because the body acquired through past craving is subject to the maturation of past karma. However, if one does not delight in feeling, craving will not have the opportunity to arise and set off reactions of like and dislike that provide further fuel for the round, and thus the round will come to an end. So the link is broken between feeling and craving. And karmic formations, sankharas, are what make things difficult for us. Karmic formations, sankharas, are the 2nd link. They arise from ignorance, the 1st link, and are there before consciousness, which is the 3rd link. Before consciousness, that's the important point. These sankharas, these karmic formations, our latent unconscious tendencies. Consciousness knows that we have to break the link between feeling and craving, and yet we still act out our desires and aversions. It seems that we have to face our compulsions, our addictions, our fixations, and experience the pain that they cause to ourselves and to others again and again before we can truly be free of them. And that's when Zazen is helpful. The longer we practice, the clearer that we see the moment when these negative impulses arise in our body, speech, and mind. And we also have the precepts as the sort of a guardrail. The guardrail is there, and it is there if we take the precepts to heart. The guardrail prevents us from toppling into craving, into compulsive behavior. So that's where the precepts are very helpful. Just take the example of anger. Some people have anger, they have a real problem with anger, and they work on their anger, and the precept is not to indulge in anger. So, yes, we get angry, but we stop ourselves, and we don't indulge in that anger, but we pull back a bit. And over time, over the years, our tendency to flare up diminishes. Yes, we still get angry, but our anger doesn't burn us as much, and it doesn't burn others as much. And so we're lessening this link between feeling and craving. Craving can also mean the indulging of all the different types of emotions. Again, the Buddha is helpful for this. The Buddha gives some very good advice for this. Whenever you see a form, let there be just seeing. Wherever you hear a sound, let there be just hearing. Wherever you smell a scent, let there be just smelling. Wherever you taste a flavour, let there be just tasting. Wherever you experience a physical sensation, let there be just sensing. And when a thought arises, let it be just a natural phenomena arising in the mind. When it is like this, there will be no self. There will be no moving about here and there, and no stopping anywhere. This is the end of suffering. Okay, one last discourse, and it's not as complex as the couple that we've just been working on. It's about wisdom, and it's about wisdom, not intellectual learning or philosophical wisdom, but it's really prajna wisdom that's in question. The wisdom of non-duality, the wisdom of our no-self, of emptiness. And so the king asks Nāgasena, where does this wisdom dwell? Nowhere, O king. Then there is no such thing as wisdom, the king said. Where does the wind dwell, O king? Oh, nowhere, Nāgasena. So, is there no such thing as wind? Ah, well answered, Nāgasena. So again, Nāgasena wins the king round. There are many other discourses in the questions of King Milinda. It's 2 volumes, so we've just touched upon some of the important ones, but there have been many others. So Where does the wind dwell, O king? Nowhere, Nāgasena. So there is no such thing as wind. When answered Nāgasena, of course there is wind. The Diamond Sutra states, arouse the mind without it dwelling anywhere. Arouse the mind without it dwelling anywhere. In other words, don't get stuck. In Zazen, if we catch ourselves lost in thoughts, fixating on something that happened in the past, ruminating over some slight done to us, or some wrong turning we may have made, just return to the breath or the koan. Let everything else drop away. Become focused and light. Focused and light. Then we can arouse the mind without it dwelling anywhere. We'll stop now and recite the 4 vows. The teaching you have received is offered freely. If you would like to make a donation to support the continuation of this podcast service or learn more about practice opportunities at the Auckland Zen Centre, please visit www.aucklandzen.org.nz.